Stay until the end. We need new horsepower. That was the phrase that ended my 18-year career at Larkwell Logistics. I was sitting at the end of the long, glass-walled conference room when the chairman dropped the bomb. My name is David Harlan, 58 years old. Stay until the end. And until that moment, I was the senior vice president of operations, responsible for building Larkwell's delivery network from the ground up. I had pulled us through the 2008 recession, navigated the chaos of 2020 without a single layoff. Stay until the end. And personally secured some of our biggest contracts. I thought that history counted for something. Apparently not. We're bringing in someone with a fresh outlook. The chairman continued, still avoiding eye contact. I already knew who he meant. The CEO's son-in-law, 33. A background in lifestyle branding. No logistics experience. I didn't argue. What was the point? The decision had been made behind closed doors, probably on a golf course. Stay until the end. All that was left was to smile through a farewell party while I trained the guy replacing me. As they talked about transition planning, I ran my thumb over a business card I'd kept in my jacket pocket for months. Stay until the end. It belonged to someone who understood the value of experience. Someone who'd once told me, if things ever change at Larkwell, call me first. That card was about to change everything. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. Stay until the end. Standing alone by the tall windows as the Houston skyline turned shades of gold. For 18 years, this building had been my second home. Back in 2005, when Larkwell Logistics was barely competing with the bigger names in freight, I helped lead our turnaround. Stay on, I still remember our first major win, Drexler Petrochemical. It was a 1 in 20 million contract everyone thought we were too small to handle. But I made it happen. I worked 6 months straight building trust with their procurement team, by mapping every delivery spec, shaving 15% off their cost structure with a new route design. That victory changed everything. Back then, our CEO shook my hand and said, David, you just saved this company. But lately, he barely acknowledged me. Stay until the end. Things had been shifting for months. I wasn't invited to strategy meetings anymore. Budget decisions were being made without me. And when I raised red flags about a proposed delivery reroute that would have cost our biggest client tens of thousands, and told I was too focused on legacy models, And then came Ryan Ashcroft, the CEO's son-in-law, a guy who once asked if we needed refrigerated trucks for delivering industrial lubricants. Seriously, he started showing up at client meetings, sit in the corner, fiddling with his phone. Every time he spoke, clients looked confused. They didn't say anything, but I could feel it. Their trust wasn't in the company. It was in me. 3 months before the board pushed me out. Stay until the end, I got a call that should have clued me in. It was Alyssa Cormack, the procurement director at Drexler Petrochemical and someone I had worked with for nearly a decade. She said, voice low, stay until the end. Off the record. Are there leadership changes happening at Larkwell? Nothing official, but there could be some transitions ahead. There was a pause, then she said something I didn't expect. If anything changes, call me. Stay until the end. The relationship we've built is too important to risk. She then gave me her direct cell number and personal card. I tucked it into my wallet and didn't think much of it at the time. Now, sitting at my desk with that card in hand, stay until the end, just what she had really given me. A lifeline. That Friday, they hosted the farewell party. It was scheduled for 4:00 p.m. in the same conference room where they fired me. That morning, I spent a few hours training around our major accounts. Stay until when we got to the Drexler file. He said, so this is just moving chemicals from point A to point B, right? How hard can that be? I didn't answer. I just handed him the file and told him to study the delivery specs carefully. At 30:30, I packed up the last of my things and walked to the conference room. A blue frosted cake read, "Thank you, David." About 20 people showed up, mostly warehouse crew and drivers who had been with me through it all. The board members. Nowhere in sight? The stay until the end. The CEO mumbled a short speech about my dedication and years of service. Then Ryan stepped forward, oozing confidence. I just want to say David's done great work here. He began, that smug grin already forming. But business evolves, you know. Stay until the end. We need new energy, new ideas. Your time is over, old man. But don't worry. I'll take good care of everything you built. Silence. People looked at the floor. A few shifted in their chairs. Someone even coughed just to break the tension. Stay until the end. I said nothing. I didn't shake Ryan's hand. But I did shake the hands of every warehouse supervisor, driver, and junior ops manager in the room. The people who actually mattered. Then I walked out carrying my cardboard box outside. Stay until the end. I sat in my truck for a while. The sun was setting behind the Larkwell building, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I thought about the 18 years of missed dinners, late-night deliveries, and payroll emergencies I personally helped resolve. Stay until the end. I thought about how they replaced all that with who thought logistics was just moving stuff. Then, I pulled Laura's business card out of my wallet. I hit dial. She picked up on the second ring, David. She said warmly, "On." The board made their move, I said simply. "Let me guess. Ryan Ashcroft." "That's right." There was a pause on the other end, then she said, "I think it's time we had dinner." And just like that, things started to shift. Not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with quiet resolve. I was done building someone else's legacy. Now I'd build something of my own, stay until the end. Dinner with Laura Cormack wasn't just a friendly gesture. It was a strategic turning point. We met at a quiet steakhouse just outside downtown Houston. Nothing fancy, but private enough for a real conversation. She arrived on time, stay until the end. Dressed in business casual, but her tone was all business. "I wasn't surprised when I heard they let you go," she said after we ordered. "But I was disappointed in how they did it. You built the company's operational spine, David. Stay until the end. Everyone in this industry knows that." I gave a quiet nod. Appreciation doesn't show up in PowerPoint decks anymore. Laura leaned forward. "Tell me honestly, do you want to stay in logistics?" I looked her in the eye. "Stay until the end. I want to finish what I started. Just not with people who treat experience like it's a liability." She smiled slightly and slid a folder across the table. Inside was a preliminary contract. Baylex Maritime, a fast-rising logistics firm based in Galveston, was looking to expand inland freight operations. The Drexler petrochemical account, which I had handled for nearly a decade, was a key part of that plan. "They want you, David," Laura said. "Something your mind. Not just for your contacts, for your mind. Your systems. Leadership." I spent the next few days in quiet thought. Baylex wasn't a household name yet, but I saw the momentum. More importantly, I saw respect. Stay until the end. Their team had reached out multiple times over the past year asking for advice on route mapping and fleet optimization. They weren't hiring me to fix a mess. They were inviting me to build something new. By the following Monday, stay until the end, I signed on with Baylex Maritime as an executive operations consultant with a generous equity package and full autonomy over strategy. Laura personally introduced me to their executive team, and within 2 weeks, stay until the end, we began the onboarding process to formally transfer the Drexler petrochemical account from Larkwell Logistics to Baylex. That contract alone accounted for 38% of Larkwell's annual revenue. I didn't gloat. Stay until the end. I didn't send messages to old coworkers or post vague quotes on LinkedIn. I just worked quietly, professionally, and methodically. Word spread faster than I expected within a month. And 2 other former Larkwell clients, Morrison Chemical and Gulf States Energy, reached out. Both had growing concerns about Ryan's inexperience and sloppy communication. Stay until the end of them told me. Ryan had referred to trucking lanes as shipping vibes during call. I had to excuse myself to laugh in private. We arranged transition meetings by the end of Q2. Stay until the end. Baylex Maritime had absorbed 3 of Larkwell's core clients. All accounts had personally developed and maintained. That's when the panic calls started, first from middle managers. Then from Chase Langford himself, voicemails, texts. Stay until the end. Even an email that began with, "Hey, big guy." I didn't respond. I'd learned the hard way, never go back to a place that only respects you once you're gone. By midsummer, Larkwell's leadership was in shambles. Their quarterly earnings plummeted. Stay until the end. Investor confidence dropped. Ryan was quietly removed from his role under the banner of a strategic restructuring, and the CEO took an emergency leave of absence citing health concerns. Meanwhile, at Baylex, our Houston operations grew by 70%. Stay until the end. I built out a new logistics control hub and recruited a dozen former Larkwell employees, folks who had once worked under me but were overlooked in the rebranding purge. We weren't just growing, we were thriving. And yet, stay until the end. The part I took the pride in wasn't the revenue or headlines. It was the respect. At every meeting, every planning session, I was treated like a partner, not a relic. Stay until the end. They didn't ask me to just train the new guy or step aside for someone trendier. They asked me to lead. That fall, I stood on the stage at the Baylex annual conference addressing a crowd over 400 employees. I told them the truth. Stay until the end. They said I was too old to keep up. But experience isn't dead weight, it's ballast. It keeps you steady when storms come. They gave me a standing ovation. Not because I was flashy, but because I represented something they believed in: stability, stay until the end, loyalty, and earned leadership. And when I stepped off that stage, Laura was waiting in the wings. She extended a hand and said, "Told you we'd build something better." 3 weeks after my official start at Baylex Maritime. Stay until the end, I received a message from Jacob Miller, a name I hadn't heard in a while. Jacob had been one of my direct reports back at Larkwell Logistics, a solid worker in his late 30s with a good head for numbers and a quiet respect for operational discipline. Stay until the end. He wasn't flashy like Chase Langford, but he listened, he learned. Text was simple. David, I've taken over operations at Larkwell. Would appreciate a conversation if you're open. I didn't reply right away. I sat with the message for a day. Stay until the end. Then 2. Part of me didn't want the part of me. The part that had mentored guys like Jacob for years. Felt a responsibility to at least hear him out. So I called. He picked up on the first ring. Mr. Callahan, he said. Why stay until the end? His voice steady. I know we're in a tough position. But I believe we still have a chance to rebuild, and I'd rather do it with an integrity than continue pretending things haven't fallen apart. I appreciated the honesty. Stay until the end, he wasn't trying to win me back. He wasn't asking for favors. He just wanted gotten, and possibly a second chance for the company I had once helped shape. Later that week, Victoria, CEO at Baylex, stopped by my office. David, she said. Larkwell. Reached out. I nodded. They've asked if we'd consider a subcontracting partnership for overflow routes. Nothing long-term, but enough to stabilize their core. Victoria paused, studying me. I trust your judgment. It wasn't an easy decision. But in the end, I agreed to a trial partnership, with strict conditions. Larkwell would handle only low-risk overflow, monitored closely by our systems. In my stay until the end, they'd have to meet our quality standards, safety protocols, and delivery KPIs, no exception. And to Jacob's credit, he hit every single one of those conditions. The collaboration wasn't flashy, but it was functional. And more importantly, stay until the end. It gave honest workers at Larkwell, people who did nothing to do with the nepotism that got me fired, a fighting chance. Meanwhile, Baylex Maritime was riding a wave. The Forbes article hit newsstands 2 months later with the headline, Stay until the end. Baylex Maritime redefines inland freight, leadership, loyalty, and a 90 million turnaround. I was quoted midway through the piece. Relationships don't live in spreadsheets. They're earned through midnight deliveries, bad weather. Stay until the end, and promises kept. It wasn't just PR fluff, it was the truth. That belief had built my career, and now it was the backbone of our explosive growth. Within 6 months, we had opened new regional hubs in Dallas, Baton Rouge, and Albuquerque. Stay until the end. Clients who had once signed 5-year agreements with Larkwell were now knocking on our door, asking if we had capacity to take them on. And that equity stake Baylex had offered me, it was now worth more than my last decade of salary combined. Stay until the end. But money wasn't the reward that mattered most. It was walking into the operations floor each morning and hearing the radio chatter from dispatch. It was watching veteran drivers high-five new hires. Stay until the end. It was knowing I had helped rebuild something rooted in respect, not politics. One morning, as I was reviewing performance metrics in the Baylex Control Center, my phone buzzed with a message from my daughter, Melanie. Saw the article in Logistics Weekly. Stay until the end. Proud of you, Dad. I stared at the message a long time, and I walked outside the loading dock, leaned on the railing, and watched as one of our freight trucks pulled out a front 200-mile run to Oregon. The engine roared. The taillights faded. Stay until the end. Because this time, the road ahead belonged to me. By the time Friday rolled around, the atmosphere felt more like a storm front than a celebration. Walter spent the morning training Chase on key accounts. Stay until the end. Watching him nod absently while clearly not grasping even the basic mechanics of their operations. During the session about the Petroax Industries contract, Chase had the nerve to smirk and say, "So basically, we just move stuff from point A to point B. Stay until the end. How hard can that be?" Walter didn't argue. He simply handed over the client file and told him to pay close attention to the delivery specs. No one at Gravora Group truly understood what was at stake. Stay until the end, or rather, what was about to slip through their fingers. At 3:30 p.m., Walter boxed up his last personal items, then made his way to the main conference room. Inside was a cake with, "Thank you." Walter scrawled in blue icing, and about 20 people. Mostly warehouse staff and drivers who had worked alongside him for years. None of the board members showed. Apparently, stay until the end. They had other commitments. The CEO gave a short speech about Walter's years of service and loyalty, words that rang hollow after the way they dismissed him. And Chase stepped forward. "I just want to say," Chase began. Stay until the end, his usual smug expression in place, "that Walter's done great work here, but business evolves, you know. We need new energy. New ideas. Your time is over, old man. But don't worry, I'll take good care of everything you built." The room went quiet. Stay until the end. A few drivers shifted uncomfortably. One of the warehouse supervisors looked away, embarrassed. Walter, however, didn't flinch. He didn't fire back. He simply stood up, shook hands with the people who mattered, and walked out with his box. Now stay until the end. In the parking lot, he sat in his truck for a long time, staring at the sun setting behind the building that had been his second home for 18 years. He thought about the all-nighters, the emergency reroutes. Stay until the end. The times he'd skip family events just to ensure a shipment made it on time. He thought about the clients who had trusted him. Not the company him. He pulled out his phone, found Alyssa Cormack's card. She answered on the second ring. Walter. Stay until the end. I was wondered made their move. He said, I heard Chase Langford, right? The son, in law with the marketing degree. That's the one. There was a pause, and then Alyssa said, Walter, I think it's time we had a conversation. Are you free for dinner tomorrow? Walter smiled faintly. I'll be there. The next evening they met at a quiet steakhouse in West Houston. Alyssa had already chosen a booth in a discreet corner. Stay until the end. When Walter arrived, she didn't waste time. She opened a leather folder and slid documents across the table. Before we talk business, I just want to say how sorry I am about what happened. She began. 18 years, and stay until the end. And they replace you with someone who asked me last week if our lubricants needed to be shipped in refrigerated trucks. Walter blinked. He asked you that. Apparently, he confused us with a food distributor, she said, shaking her head. They both chuckled. Then she got serious. Walter, I've been doing this job for 15 years. When you say a delivery will arrive at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, it arrives at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. That's not common. That's trust. And that trust doesn't extend to Chase. She pulled another document out, a contract summary. This is our current agreement with Gravora, $120 million over 3 years. That's roughly 40% of their total revenue. Stay until the end. But this contract exists because of relationships, not just price. When we had the pipeline incident in 2018, you were a plant in the middle of the night coordinating emergency shipments. When our usual vendor failed last winter, stay until I found a new supplier within hours. Walter nodded. That's the job. No, that's what made you indispensable. She leaned forward. Baylex Maritime reached out to us 6 months ago. Stay until the end. They're expanding into inland logistics and need leadership. I told them we were happy with Gravora, but that was back when you were with them. Walter felt it all clicking into place. If you were to join Baylex? Alyssa continued. Yeah. We would have a reason to reopen that conversation. She laid out the offer. Executive consultant. Full operational authority. Substantial equity participation. And one condition: they needed an answer within 2 weeks. Stay until the end. Walter sipped his coffee and loved the contract. The base pay was strong, the equity package. Game. Changing. More than that. A chance to build something new. Something clean, something his. He didn't need 2 weeks. Stay to the end. He already knew the answer. By the end of the third quarter, Baylex Maritime wasn't just thriving. It was Petroax, Morrison Chemical, and Gulf States Energy all under our umbrella. Stay until the end. Our inland logistics division had faster than any projection had predicted. The numbers spoke for themselves. Revenue had nearly doubled. Client satisfaction scores were at an all-time high, and internally employee turnover was down more than 60%. Stay until the end. I kept my focus. No headlines, no speeches, no social media posts, just results. And that's when the ripple effects truly began to show. Gravora's bore already under fire after the mask line departure. Stay until the end had moved quickly to do damage control. Chase Langford's sudden family leave became a permanent resignation. The CEO, Paul Davidson, appointed Jacob Miller as interim operations director, a quiet, capable logistics analyst I had mentored years ago. Stay until the end. But the damage was too deep. Gravora's investors panicked. Several regional clients canceled contracts, citing inconsistent performance and leadership turnover. With over $90 million in lost accounts in less than 90 days. Stay until the end. They began seeking emergency capital to cover operational costs. One afternoon, I got a call from a number I hadn't saved. It was Paul Davidson himself. David, he said, voice tight. I know we haven't spoken since the transition. Stay until the end. I was hoping we could meet. I knew what was coming. He wanted help. Paul, I'm not interested in consulting. I'm under full-time contract now and my calendar is full. There was silence on the other end. I understand, he finally said. Before I underestimated you. If there's ever a door, open. There isn't, I said gently. But I appreciate the call. We hung up. And that was the same week? Stay until the end. I received a letter from a Gravora warehouse manager. Inside was a copy of an internal memo announcing the closure of the North Belt facility, the one I had worked at for 18 years. The place where I'd built the scheduling system. Stay until the end. Designed the dock rotation charts and trained 3 generations of drivers. Now it was being shut down and leased to a third-party packaging company. I didn't celebrate, but I did pause. Sometimes justice doesn't come with fanfare. Sometimes stay and shows up quietly, like a sealed envelope that confirms what you already knew. At Baylex, we doubled down on our momentum. I personally helped train 5 new operations supervisors, including 2 veterans who had been overlooked at Gravora. Stay until the end. We launched an internal mentorship program to identify high Potential dispatchers and logistics planners, people who wanted more than just a paycheck, people who wanted to build something they could be proud of. On a late Friday afternoon, stay until the end, I walked the floor of our new Houston terminal. I saw technicians tuning rigs, drivers laughing over coffee, and shift leads reviewing manifests on tablets we never had budget for before. As I turned to leave, one of our youngest drivers, Caleb, straight to the end, fresh out of the Navy, called out at Harlan. I just wanted to say, thank you, sir. You gave me a real shot. No one else even called me back. I smiled. Just show up on time, keep your record clean, and treat people right, I said. Stay until the end. That's all I ask. He nodded. Yes, sir. It was in that moment that I realized something important. Legacy isn't built in titles or offices. It's built in the people you empower, the systems you leave better than you found them. Stay until the end, and the doors you're open for others once your own have closed. Months later, I visited the old Gravora building one last time. The sign was gone. The parking lot was nearly empty. Stay until the hour. A Sabana flapped in the wind over what used to be my office window. I didn't linger. Instead, I drove back to Baylex, walked into the control center, and watched our newest team member, Caleb, the young Navy vet, lead his first briefing. He was nervous but steady, clear but humble. He reminded me of someone I used to be. As I listened to him speak, I realized something. I hadn't just survived what they did to me. I'd outgrown it. And in doing so, stay until the end. I'd made room for people who'd been overlooked just like I was. I didn't get revenge, I got restoration. You don't always need to fight back to win. Sometimes the most powerful answer is simply moving forward, with grace, with grit. Stay until the end. And with your values intact, people may try to replace you, ignore you, even erase you. But if you've done your work with integrity, your impact will speak louder than their decisions ever could. Stay until the end. Has someone ever tried to write you off, only to watch you rise anyway? Share your story in the comments. We read every single one like this story. Subscribe for more true tales of resilience, redemption, and quiet strength. Because out here, experience still matters.